Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Bob Wood. I'm with AFCEA, and I'm proud today to have an opportunity to introduce the first theater session we've got, a theater session on cyber education. It's really a continuation of the cyber education path we've been on with this track. It talks today about the NIST 800-171, DFARS, and contractor responsibilities for the covered defense system. And this is something that's important to our industry partners, also the government as well, and we brought really two very, very good instructors forward today, experts in the field, Mr. Jeff Hancock and Mr. Steve Charles, who today are going to share one mic and do it kind of a tag team on a briefing that will give us some insight into the decisions that have been made of late for the area of covered defense systems. This, by the way, is an approved accredited class by CompTIA. It's a CEU that is worth one continuing education unit. And for those who would like to have, at the conclusion of the class, have their badges scanned, we can provide for those AFCEA members follow-up on that education. Let me mention some of the credentials here. Mr. Jeff Hancock, who's a senior fellow at the George Washington University Center for Cyber and Homeland Security and is a principal at Advanced Cybersecurity Group. He has been involved in cybersecurity for 25 years. He makes you wonder what it was called back then, but he's been involved for 25 years and served federal customers, cybersecurity instruction and learning, and has worked in active participant in defense intelligence, a variety of red teaming, and managed investigations and threat modeling across the Department of Defense, intel community, and civilian agencies. If you know INSA, the intelligence community, Mr. Hancock is involved with that. He's also a senior fellow at the George Washington Center for Cybersecurity as chairman of the Federal CIO-CISO Alliance and is co-chair of the Cyber Intelligence Task Force at INSA. Extremely qualified, and I think you'll appreciate his presentation. Teamed with him is Mr. Stephen Charles, who for the past 2 decades has worked with literally hundreds of technology manufacturers in helping them succeed in the government marketplace. He has a breadth and depth of expertise in almost every dimension of government technology and the ecosystem surrounding it, and has provided technology manufacturers with clear guidance and help and strategy as they promote success. He is adept at mapping technology products through their life cycle and a variety of other manner of getting through technology law and regulations and policy. He was, prior to founding MX Group, where he is now, Mr. Charles served as Vice President of Contract Management from Selbury and Associates. Degrees, of course, experience, profound. I think you'll enjoy their presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our speakers.
Well, thank you, Bob, and welcome to all of you. And Jeff, come on up here. We're going to tag team this. We're going to have, it's going to be a little awkward because we only have one microphone, but we really are going to kick this back and forth. So our agenda, why is this important? What it means to you. We're going to give you the history of CUI and the DFARS rule, and then we're going to move into what this means to you and some phased approaches to getting ready for the requirement for basically anybody who sells to DoD, directly or indirectly, prime, sub, upstream, downstream, to be compliant with 800-171. And Jeff has a lot of insight into all the behind-the-scenes conversations on this, and I'm hoping that he'll bring that out as we go forward. So go ahead, Jeff. Why is this important? Oh, you want me to do this? Okay. Protecting unclassified, controlled information is something that has been a topic of conversation for the last 3 years. It began with the executive order in November 2010. The administration said, we need a regime to deal with all this other information because the contractors are the weak link in our systems. By the way, these slides will all be available. You just give me your card at the end and I'll send you the deck because I have links to every source document related to this topic at the end, okay? So I'm happy to pump it out. So since 2010, what has happened? NARA was tasked with creating the structure and they pumped out a proposed rule very quickly. OMB, Office of Federal Procurement Policy, were to write rules to implement this controlled unclassified information regime. We don't have rules yet. So many people say, CUI, nothing's happening. DoD said, we need to move. And it leveraged some existing statutory authority around network penetration reporting and cloud services to expand their rule, a DFARS, that went into effect in August, that in effect requires all of us selling to the government to get on board with this 800-171 thing by December of 2017. I would just note that in that executive order, kicking off this whole thing around CUI, DoD was not mentioned, right? It's NARA, it's OMB, and it's NIST for the standards. NARA's done its job. NIST has done its job, the 800-171. We still don't have rules implementing it. But the DFARS does start implementing it for DoD. So why is this important, Jeff?
So, as a lot of you know, right, so breaches happen pretty regularly, a whole lot faster than they did in 2010. This is a list of some of the breaches that have gone on in the last 12 to 18 months across federal agencies and organizations. The primary cause, or route actually, is through third parties. So as 800-171 was being developed this time last year, from really January to publish in June of last year, the conversations around the OMB breach was happening. The first OMB breach was happening. The second one was just kicking off. A lot of the folks at NIST were very concerned, which is why they published 800-171 to be that guideline. And then the pressure kind of fell down from on high into DoD, thinking, okay, we control so many secure systems, as you can tell, a lot of these do have links into DoD, that DoD started getting very concerned, which is why they decided to launch this interim rule in August with some broad powers and broad responsibilities, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But when you're looking at this as an organization, you've got several federal agencies all saying, yes, this is important. Yes, we should do something. Yes, we're not sure when we're going to do it, but here's some guidelines. And now you've got DoD coming out and saying, on your contracts going forward, the contracting officer is now responsible to look at all of your stuff as it applies to 800-171. So everybody's got on the hook now for that. Everybody. Every organization that wants to do business with the government, your data, you have to comply to some degree with 800-171, with DoD. With the expectation there is that will filter out through the rest of federal agencies sooner than later. So, go ahead and click.
Okay, so we're all responsible because we're only as secure as the weakest link in the chain. And so we as contractors who hold government identifiable information as a result of a contract action are now going to be held accountable for that data, where it resides and where it transits. So we're going to run through the process of this DFARS rule, right? This is DoD moving out. And of course, every rule comes from some kind of statutory or executive branch authority. An executive order or a statute is what then is implemented in rules. And this particular DFARS case, the first rule came out in August of... the first rule actually came out in 2013. The two statutes that make this rule that came out last August stem back to 2013 and then more recently, the NDAA of 2015. These two statutory provisions in the National Defense Authorization Act require DoD to develop a system of rapid reporting whenever there is a cyber incident. The second one is more complete. I provide you in these slides links to both of these, and if you want to do shortcuts, go to the second one because it expands on the first of 2013. What you will notice in the statute is that it doesn't reference CUI. It talks more about DoD access to your systems as a contractor for unclassified information. It talks more about your incident response plans, breach reporting. And does not mention CUI or the executive order. And so some lawyers around town have said, well, DFARS, the Defense Department doesn't have the authority to actually put this in place. And the Defense Department says, no, we're doing it. So we have this set of clauses in the DFARS now since August that requires us to maintain knowledge of what is now called covered defense information. It's a new term. It was created in this rule for the first time. Covered defense information. It's unclassified, and it's considered covered if it falls into 4 buckets, which we're going to go into. I just want to give you the clauses first. So the first clause, 204-7012, is to be included in all contract actions. Every solicitation, even FAR Part 12 commercial item solicitations, even an RFQ against a GSA schedule contract, every solicitation now has to include, and since August has, whether you knew it or not, has included 7012, 7008, and 7009. All of which points to this world of covered defense information that nobody quite knows what is. The rule also adds a couple of clauses related to cloud services and basically requires us as contractors to disclose any time we're planning to use a cloud service in the performance of a contract, and requires us to agree that we are going to comply with the cloud services security guidelines, most recently published by DoD. This is all in this one DFARS case, and I linked to everything, so if you get the presentation, you'll have it all, okay? The 4 categories of information are anything that is provided or anything you do under a contract related to controlled technical information, which is a term we all know. That has been and existed. But then we have this expanded definition of covered information that includes critical information. Anything related to operations security, transportation, logistics, anything, any system that touches any of those activities falls into the OPSEC bucket. And of course, export controls, ITAR and EAR is the third. And finally, we have this new category of any other information. It makes it pretty hard to argue what's not covered. I've tried. There have been many companies, including my own, who have said, surely this doesn't apply to me, right? We usually go into denial after we get angry, and then we finally have to come to terms with the fact that some of this data is covered. And we're going to have to identify where it is in our systems, which systems, and not just our own systems, but how they connect to suppliers upstream and partners downstream, subcontractors downstream. And for the first time, to my knowledge, there is a procurement rule in this DFARS case that says that for reporting incidents and being responsible for the 800-171, subcontractors who typically do not have a relationship with the government are actually now required to have a direct relationship for this purpose. So this is really a big change on a whole bunch of levels. When this rule was promulgated, it went into effect immediately and required us all to get on board with 800-171 by the end of the year. We got an extension, right? But as hard as I look for exceptions, I can't really find them, right? Every clause, all these clauses have to be in all the contract actions. So every contract has this requirement. And none of the clauses provide any kind of wiggle room on how I would identify non-covered information, right? You would think if there's covered defense information, there would be something out there that's non-covered, but there is none, right? So the 4 categories are named, but I don't see a way to identify anything else and have a contracting officer agree, because the contracting officers right now are just saying, what's your 800-171 plan? So to me, and I've read all the industry comments, and I've got links to all that stuff, again, in the slides, while everyone is arguing, does DOD have statutory authority? Is there data that doesn't fall into the 4 buckets? The bottom line is, every contracting officer is including these clauses, and all they're going to say is, what's your 800-171 plan? So I'm saying, I guess we better get on board. That's my industry perspective on this. And the only wiggle room and room for negotiation is, okay, my systems meet 800-171 except in these areas because we do it this way. So alternatives to the same security controls will be accepted, but you have to justify, and they have to and you have to prove to DoD that they provide equal security. Okay, well that's enough from me. Okay, Jeff, talk about our steps to addressing this.
So a couple things real quick, right? At the end of the day, the impetus of all this, as we said earlier, was the issue and stress of data management, data security. As a federal agency, as DoD, I need to make sure that all of my contractors' information is secure, everything they're touching is secure, which is why the breadth and depth of 171 was put in place, which is why DFARS now is saying, look to this document, look to what NIST has created, because this meets our needs, right? This is not, again, this isn't optional anymore, which is not a bad thing, actually, when you think about it, right? A majority of the breaches are caused through third parties, vendors to DoD. So how do they secure that? From their perspective, they've got to lock everything down as fast as they can, and this is the way they want to do it. Now, they originally wanted everyone to be compliant, literally compliant with these standards last December, and this was in October. Industry pushed back and said, no, wait a second. This is going to take time. Multi-factor authentication, a breach response plan for a small company. What do I have to do? Who do I have to discuss this with? Security assessments is now actually one of the things they require. They require all contractors to go through and show a security assessment. They've been reviewed. They've been assessed. They can prove that they're either in compliance with 171 or they have alternatives. And again, those are going to be challenged pretty consistently. So as that was going on, industry pushed back very hard, and DoD came back and said, okay, we'll push the date out because we understand there's so many contractors and it's going to be an issue. Regardless, in 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, a handful of months from now, there's going to be another breach across a federal agency and or DoD, and this is going to take more visibility again, right? The focus is going to double down on this issue as everybody's going to be compliant as quickly as possible. Again, it's not a bad thing, but it does make everybody take a step back and say, okay, what exactly, as a small company, what do I have to do? As a subcontractor, what do I have to control? How do I know how do I figure out the information on my network is government data? And then how do I segment that out? Because you actually have to tag that information. As a small company, you have to identify your government-controlled data within your network. That's one of the steps. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, and waiting until final deadline compliance is not an option because these things take a few months to get moving within any company of any size. With some exceptions, I mean, unless you're Lockheed in the audience, you've probably figured this out already. One of the reasons why DoD wanted to do this is because several years ago, DoD decided to start using the NIST 853 risk management framework. So they're doing a lot of DoD transitions, which is great. But they also realized that's a big document, and it's really focused towards federal agencies, not government contractors. So when the development of 171 was developed this time last year, the idea was, how do we not take this huge bucket of 853 controls, how do we reduce that down to something more practical for commercial companies, which is the result of 800-171. Now in that document, there's 109 different controls that you have to comply to. On top of that, there's some standards, some other things you've got to do. All of that is actually fairly well laid out in that 800-171 document. And there's a table in that document, actually, in the back of 800-171 that shows 853 controls and 171 controls. So it helps you map that and figure that out, which is great. It's very practically designed that way. So as was said earlier, when this was initiated in August, questions came out saying, okay, from what contract date forward do we have to comply to this? And who do we prove the compliance to? And DoD came back and said, well, let's have an industry day and talk about it. And as the result of that industry day, the decision was contracting officers are your point of contact for compliance to 171. So that being said, at any point, if you have a contract today from last year, your contracting officer can come back to you and say, show your compliance to 800-171. They can ask that question. And to some degree, you're going to have to prove something to some point. You can always point back to, wait a second, this was actually launched in August, and the contracting officer can say, well, wait a second, though, this is an ongoing contract, and we're past that date, so you still need to show compliance to all of your current contracts. There's 2 instances I know firsthand where that's happened. So there is a need to educate contracting officers, because this is not their bailiwick, as you can imagine. So there is going to be a significant amount of effort on the part of federal contractors to educate the contracting officers about what the parameters are for this. So they don't get 50,000 different documents from 50,000 different vendors showing their compliance. They're going to want one document that everybody uses to make it easy for them to digest, okay, everybody's secure and we're good to go. But at any point, they can pull your ability to bid on contracts if you're not compliant. So that's another challenging issue. So again, important information. Determine which systems contain this information that they outline in the document. All of government consult. We're kind of throwing a bigger blanket on this, saying if you're doing any work with the government and you're from replying to an RFI to ongoing operations, that's just federal data, and you're going to have to show that compliance. So you're going to have to sort through that. Every organization is going to be a little different, and that's the headache that everybody's going to have to go through, identifying what that controlled data is. Top, yeah. There you go. So doing a gap analysis on your systems. Really, in the document, 800-171, in that last handful of pages, there is a mapping that shows what you should be compliant to. It's fairly descriptive in some segments. Being able to identify your systems and how your systems interact with the government and how they share that confidential information or that uncontrolled information, and being able to map that back is foundational to proving to your contracting officer that you can do with this, that you're compliant with it. As well as defining the plan, how are you going to be compliant? The gaps in your plan today, what is the roadmap to get you to where you need to be in that time frame? Developing a breach response plan. So when people get breached, agencies get breached, you'll need to have a breach response plan that shows how are you going to respond, how are you going to react, who are you going to call from DoD, how are you going to let them in your network so they can help do the remediation, so they can look firsthand and investigate what has happened, which is one of the mandatory requirements. And how do you do the information sharing around that as well? We'll go back to that. Right? How do you do the information share? What do you share that with data with them? Yep.
So can you talk a little bit about what it takes to get hooked up with DivNet and all that? I'm not sure everybody knows.
Yeah. Fast. It's fairly complicated. Fast answer is work with your contracting officer and talk to them about getting connected up with DivNet. If you're not already. Most contractors are. Contracting officers have the paperwork and authority to grant you access to the network and be able to feed your data into that system. It does get fairly complicated, but that's the fastest answer to that question. So, second, addressing your cloud services. So as a subcontractor, assuming you have third-party organizations providing help to you, or cloud services in this case, you're going to have to show, to some degree, the cloud services you provide and how you control, to what a degree you can, how you control that information. So if you're a sub and you're providing services to DoD, and you're using cloud services, you have to show how your network is secure, how that cloud is secure to the capabilities that you control, and then that third-party cloud provider is going to have to show something as well. So as you can see, again, overall, it's a great idea. It's very important and very necessary because this helps ensure to some degree our security. However, the complexities as a small, medium, or large company kind of stretch out there for a little bit. Right? There's some things you've got to be able to manage through in this situation that aren't going to be easy initially. That's why we're encouraging everybody to start now. Start looking at your systems, start looking at your third-party providers, looking at your software, identifying the data in your network, and starting to put together some of these plans. Because, again, as soon as there's another breach, they're going to turn around and ask everybody for this information. So it's always better to be prepared. As I mentioned earlier, there's actually 109 controls in NIST 171, and those are tied back to 853. Again, didn't want to apply all the controls in 853 They wanted to provide a subset of what those controls are to make it easier for people to be able to implement it. Mapping it to your organization, conducting an assessment to make sure you're compliant, and and identifying and managing your operational parameters. Those are fairly important things that you're going to have to end up doing at some point. And please, by all means, questions. There's a mic. Holler really loud, whatever the case may be. Happy to take any comments or questions.
Yeah. Please feel free to come to the mic and ask a question.
Yep.
We do want to have them recorded, so please come to the mic.
Yeah. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So breach reporting through DibNet to DibNet. If the breach occurs at the subcontractor level, do they report direct to DibNet, or is it through the prime?
Yeah, there's two ways. So yes, go ahead. You want to?
Go ahead.
So both. Fast answer, both. So every relationship, as Steve mentioned, DoD is going to want that subcontractor relationship directly because of this.
Right.
So they're going to want some sort of access, same access as a regular prime would have, and being able to report that data.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting comment where you said you now actually have a direct contractual relationship with a subcontractor for that purpose. I think earlier versions of the DFARS clause actually stipulated that you had to have a direct contractual relationship with the organization or entity that controlled, what was it, the configuration and control of the environment.
Yep.
I noticed on the interim rule that's been taken out. Do you know the history of why that occurred?
So that was brought up particularly because the two things: the technical complexity of answering that question from a sub's perspective. You know, how do I figure that out? And then who I report it to. And the second part of that is, what's DoD going to do with it? Great, I get this information from the sub, and I understand the configurations and where the data sits, but what am I going to do with it? Do I have the database to utilize that information as a DoD person? What value is that going to be? So there is value in that, but there's a complexity of managing that information and data that DoD took a step back and said, no, we don't want to do it yet. We want to figure this out first, right? And if you look at this, this is definitely an order of magnitude problem. They're trying to address a broader issue with multiple complexities. As we go forward in this next 12 months, it's going to be more complicated for DoD to manage, but it's going to be necessary for everybody. So, yep.
Are you going to be briefing this at the NCMS DSS conference in Nashville, by any chance?
I'm not. It was brought up as somebody should. I'm not sure if they've found somebody yet. So, but it's a key point that a conversation has been going on for the last 2 months about how do we brief this, who should know, how do we communicate this out. So,
I mean, facility security officers at the contractor and subcontractor level have to force their IT departments to get compliance. So
yep.
It's going to fall upon them. So someone's got to go brief it at that conference.
Fully agree.
I just wanted to add, and maybe you can provide more color on this, but it's my understanding that, you know, these subs who don't have this relationship but now will have to be able to report, one of their first step actions is to get this medium level cert to actually communicate with DibNet. It's apparently there's this low, medium, high level cert, and this is going to require the medium level cert to start the relationship, to have that communication. And I didn't get that written on these slides, but that's like the hurdle. That's the first step.
So from a DoD perspective, right, imagine you're dealing with all the primes because you only have a limited amount of resources to manage all this, and all of a sudden this opens up doubles or triples the amount of organizations you have to work with and give access to the DibNet and manage the DibNet. So they're taking a step back saying, okay, we've got to have an infrastructure in place to use all this information and manage all this information. Right now the concern is that's not going to get done in the short term, but when there's a problem and a breach, everybody's going to be running around with their hair on fire trying to figure out how to solve it. So.
Yeah, so I think there was a concern beyond just the subcontractor reporting the breach. There was concern about, do I have a direct contractual relationship with the organization that is housing my data?
Right.
So if I need access to my data, so for instance, if the subcontractor, who I do not have privy of contract with, has my data, they go out of business and they just disappear. How do I go after them because my relationship is with the prime? And this had a huge impact when you're trying to deal with some of our major cloud service providers, i.e. AWS and others, Microsoft, who only sell through VARs. So did that have some of the impact or rationale of why that was excluded from the final or the interim rule?
So cloud services were brought up ad nauseum in several meetings that I attended, and that was there were several issues that were brought up. It got to a point where they put up on a whiteboard, listed all these issues, and the check was, yes, we need to deal with this, and the X was not right now. And that was one of the not right now ones. Because of the complexity. Right? What happens if, and then how do we go after that situation? If I'm a small sub and I'm using a cloud service provider to provide data to my prime, to the government, et cetera, your point's made. What if they go out of business? What if they have a breach? How do I ensure if I'm responsible for that data that sits there, how do I make sure that that data is secure and controlled, right? Those are a list of questions that are still, unfortunately, TBD, but that just shows the complexity of this issue. So,
I remember the issues when we started putting the 8570 verbiage in contracts, and it really knocked the wind out of the sails when we started talking about money, who's going to pay for it. Is there any discussion here as far as who's picking up the tab for these additional controls and requirements?
Nope.
Okay.
The conversations, yes. Government's not picking it up.
All right.
Everything's falling back to the contractors, which is, that was a big push in November, December timeframe in these conversations. As a small company, do I have to pay extra? Well, how am I going to how do I justify this? It's just going to go into my project costs, and my costs are going to go up, and the government costs are going to go up. One of the conversations in that solution set that we were having with them was, let's identify some key, simple areas that everybody can address now. That doesn't mean you have to implement new technology. So things like an incident reporting plan, a breach response plan, right? That's not too complicated. It's not technical. The hours that you have to spend looking through your network to identify government data and how you're going to control it. So a lot of these initial recommendations are, what can you do immediately that doesn't cost you much, if anything, other than man hours, to start moving yourself down this path. And then at some point, some of the larger contractors were complaining about multi-factor authentication because they have manufacturing facilities, and do they actually have, because it's government data on that device that's being manufactured in a warehouse somewhere, all that has to have multi-factor? Well, I don't understand, and the costs go up, et cetera, and that's an extreme case. But everybody came back to the ground and said, okay, at a minimum, what can we do immediately without spending a whole lot of money that actually can help increase the security of this data? And we have a place to point to when there's a problem, so we can fix it and move on. So, yeah. Big question, though, that came up, absolutely.
Yeah, you just mentioned mid-level cert. Would you please elaborate on that? And second part of my question is, if a company implemented ISO 27000 using NIST 800-171 controls, would that be sufficient to show the compliance?
So I'll start in reverse. So the compliance issue is 171 and ISO. There is the mapping and mapping to that, as in if you do this, that'll be fine. That's going to be a question to the contracting officer. That's someone you're going to have to sell, convince, and show. I don't have to meet 171. I'm using ISO, and here's how it maps. And you can show them. They should be fine with it because you can prove that you're using this standard in this case, and it ties back to 171, which ties back to 53. Everybody should be happy. As far as the certs go, that's really a matter of accessing government networks and government data and allowing the government to do the same. So being able to have a certificate to access DibNet, low, medium, high, is a dependency on the type of work you do, the network access you need, and the criticality of the work you're on, the project you're on. So those are really, that's the initial assessment, and then they go through a ton of paperwork to vet everybody, essentially. It's not as ominous as a security clearance, but looking at a company over and making sure your folks are cleared, your network is secure, your access is secure, a handful of things that they have to certify. And that gives you that cert, and then gives you the ability to communicate back and forth with them. So, did you have a comment?
Yeah. So it's this universe is now expanding to tens of thousands of entities that traditionally was just the defense industrial base of maybe 400 companies, right? So boom, a new rule, 10,000 plus new contractors. You can't flip the light switch and make this happen overnight. I would just suggest that if you're doing DoD work and you're a little and you're somewhat critical to the operation, that you start the relationship with the folks at DibNet. Just start the conversation. Way will lead to way. We'll figure this out. But like everything, this is going to take 5 years I mean, 10 years maybe, till all suppliers. But I've had conversations where they've said, you know, Steve, they order stuff off your schedule. You need to be controlling this data. The part numbers, the prices, the products. This is government identifiable information that will indicate to an outsider that, oh, they now have this capability. They just bought one of these products that's demonstrated here in the hall, and we know where it went. And so now we know that particular agency or that particular program has this capability, and that's the kind of thing we don't want to get out. So we're looking at this from our company's perspective, not just downstream, systems integrators and resellers who buy from us, but also upstream. Many times products are drop shipped from point of manufacturer. Does that data, do those people upstream, the contract manufacturers, the OEMs, the software publishers, are they also in this web of data that is going to have to comply with these standards? So as a distributor, MX Group now owned by Arrow Electronics, our current strategy for the product side of this world is to extend our systems upstream and downstream so that those partners and suppliers don't have to worry about their systems. If we can hold this data in a compliant environment with them getting access without it getting breached, we might have a solution that won't cost a whole lot of money. It's something we're working on because of the cost issue that you brought up earlier.
According to the plan, who's responsible for ensuring compliance? Who's doing the checks?
So contracting officers are responsible at this point to make sure that people are compliant. Mm-hmm. Now, what we anticipate that happening is, one, all federal contractors are going to have to do a bit amount of selling and education and training to the contracting officers so they understand that their security. The second thing that's come up is going out and getting third-party assessments. It's going to be faster for a contracting officer to say, hey, that's great. I understand you say you are. Self-certification's not what we're looking for. You need to go prove it to us. So we need somebody to go to your systems, a third party, assess your systems as it complies to this, and then present us with a document saying, yes, your system is verified.
So it's not using the existing DSS infrastructure?
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's what we thought. It was, okay, why not? Well, we want to be special. Okay. How long that's going to last? I don't know. One thing that I do want to make sure everybody understands here, too, is all we're doing right now is talking about DOD. OMB's come out with stuff for federal agencies. I mean, there's a handful of things. So this is going to be, I would firmly see this being applied to every federal agency and anybody who wants to do business with the government at all. So this is, in one aspect, this could be looked at as a test bed to see how easy this is going to be implemented in DOD, and then applied to all federal agencies and all federal contractors, all of them, which then the mechanism to manage that on the government side is going to be large. But again, all we need is another really big breach, and we'll go folks on the Hill saying, what are we doing about it? And every agency is going to freak out, and they're going to start pointing fingers. So it's faster and easier for them to point fingers at folks like us, so we have to make sure our ducks are in a row to say, we're secure, we're dealing with it, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. Question?
Hi, Chris Seidel with Millennium Engineering. When I first read the 171, I equated the need for third-party assessments similar to DCAA saying for years that you have to have your books audited to make sure that you're doing your accounting properly. Yep. Just a third set of eyes to take a look at it. Is there any thought so far as to what companies or what organizations are qualified to do these third-party assessments, and is there a certification process for them? Just like there's certain accounting companies that are qualified to audit your books for DOD.
Yep. So I was a part of the group that wrote, and drafted 800-171 a year ago. And in that whole process with NIST, that conversation came up. Should we certify? How is this going to be implemented? Right? And that was a button that a bunch of us kept pushing. Great ideas, but how are we going to implement it? How are we going to certify it? Et cetera, et cetera. There is no certifying body as of yet. So the contracting officer and DOD will essentially look for a certification paperwork that just says, yes, this third-party organization came through and said, and here's all the proof. So the proof is really in the documentation. Because there isn't a certification today, that's what they're going to be pointing to. But that also raises a good question on another conversation, another topic about how do you certify people to come in and do security assessments for your organization. As this gets pushed out to federal agencies, that question is going to come up, and you will see 1,000 contracting companies suddenly stand up and say, yep, I can do that. I can certify you, and go through that whole business process of making sure that people can do that. But you raise a good point, right? That's going to come. At some point in the next 12 months, my guess, that question's going to have to be answered pretty quickly. So,
Just an additional comment on that. So keep in mind that this is just part of this larger CUI issue. So that folks are saying, DOD is just starting to push this, and we're going to test some things, but DOD didn't have an explicit statute that said you're going to do it this way, right? It's just trying some things to actually get the ball moving, because the response to the executive order hasn't gotten any rules in place yet. But there is a lot of buzz right now that something is going to come together before the election, right? So we do expect to see some of this modify a little bit as the government-wide program starts to get fleshed out. The rumor I heard, I somehow have in my head, I'm not sure where I picked this up, that the rules around the NARA implementation government-wide around CUI are going to pop out here sometime in July. I just know that that's supposed to happen. Okay.
So I got about 15 minutes. So third, come on, ongoing. So as you just talked about, third-party security assessments, right? How is that going to work, right? So contracting officers are going to ask for due diligence. What have you done? How have you done it? Who's done it for you? And how can you prove it to me? And that could be a set of documents saying, yes, I'm 171 compliant with these things, and here's my identifiable data. Here's my breach response plan. Essentially, you could be looking at 75 pages of documentation for your small company to verify your compliance with 171. And that 75 pages is kind of a rule of thumb that we've been doing when we're talking to organizations and looking at their networks and their systems and doing this type of due diligence assessment. That's the response. That's the numbers we keep coming up with. It's around 70, 75, 80 pages from what we've done so far. So information sharing guideline and procedure. As this is a big buzz around the industry, information sharing, the need to be able to have really a government contact within your organization, so that when you have a contract and you're underway and everything's great, and you show them your breach response plan, all that's great, which you should review your breach response plan once a month typically. You need to make sure you have a communications plan set up, an information sharing plan set up with the DoD. How does that work? If I've got a problem, how do we share data quickly? When you hear something from another small company that's kind of like mine, then they've had a particular attack, how are you going to share that data with me so I can be protected? Because, I'm working on this special project for your organization. So that information has to go two-way. So strongly suggest that you look into information sharing guidelines for your organization, how you want to communicate with the government, both giving them data and getting data from them about network security. So are you in step? This is you, I think, Steve. Yep. You want to close it out?
So we tried to give you 4 phases, right? And this is the final phase, looking ahead to the government-wide program, recognizing that this is going to morph a little over time, but the one constant is the 800-171. Remember, it was in response to the executive order that NIST moved out and established the 800-171. It wasn't DOD, right? NIST built that to implement the narrow structure for the entire government. DOD said, that's good, we're going to do that. We're going to start moving now, right? So think of this holistically and recognizing that holistic view on this is coming. And also, when you get to the references in this slide deck, go to the Industry Day slides, the DoD Industry Day slides, and go to slide number 4, and you will see a beautiful graphic on the circles of data that will be bound up in this government-wide structure. And it includes everything related to any contract. The link to the registry gets you all the categories of information, which, by the way, are an update to the old atomic energy, the whole nuclear regime, right? Cyber is our nuclear regime. And how we control this unclassified information is going to amend the nuclear regime. That's the big picture of this, right? Today we're just dealing with the DFAR, but it's going to grow to government-wide, and it's going to include all contract-specific information. So those are the steps for where we're going. And those are the references. More questions? How do we get our arms around this? What have you heard? How many people are working on a 171 plan right now? Anybody? Great. All right. Today, contracting officers can ask you for the plan. So just get one together. Recognize that you're going to iterate this 6 times in the next 6 months. Just throw one together. Get your people talking. You'll iterate it over time. This is not a flip the light switch. This is a peel the onion thing for the next 18 months, and then probably a peel the onion thing at a deeper levels for the next 5 years. All right, so keep those timelines in your mind and don't freak out over this. Just get started a little bit. Okay, more questions? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so I will send you this presentation if you give me your card.
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
So I was at the presentation yesterday at this time in the morning that introduced supply chain risk management and kind of started talking about this, and so it was good to hear kind of a deeper dive into this. It seems that a lot of this is taking an inventory of what you have in a more disciplined fashion in the area of technology.
Yep.
My question is, and that's good, I've kind of put that in line with good cyber hygiene. How do you think some of our leading innovative businesses, small businesses, large businesses, would respond to the government saying, if you're going to compete in this contract area, then you need to have certain technologies installed on your network that we would feed, like data loss protection,
yep.
Like an insider threat solution.
CDM.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a solution anyway.
Yep.
So how do you think they would respond to that in terms of?
So OMB has come out with some statements saying that continuous monitoring is a key component of this, which means they've actually said federal agencies, looking outside of DoD now, federal agencies will be required to provide either CDM or a version of CDM to federal contractors so that they have access to your network. So essentially, it's DHS having access to federal contractors' networks to be updated, secured, et cetera, et cetera. That I don't know where that's going. There's a lot of conversation about it. OMB published the data on it. DoD's like, we're not going that far yet. You can take care of that issue. But that's an issue, right? How far our organization is going to go to want access to federal contractors' networks to make sure they're secure? Right. Where's the stopping point in that supply chain? Yeah. So it's a challenging question, right? There's no real quick, easy answer, but there's definitely a challenging question on that. Okay. So keep your ears open, because if you have any ideas, certainly solicit them, send them around, because that's a challenge. How are you going to do that, right? The government getting into all the networks, okay, that's a concern from a privacy perspective, but then what are they going to do with all the data? How are they going to, that's a ton of information. What are they going to do with it? Yeah,
my concern is even with very good cyber hygiene, like a lot of this is recommending, the adversary that we're up against here will still find a way in. Yep. History has shown that. Yep. So what can he do once he's inside? And that's why I asked the question about some of these other things.
Right, and that's the issue of being able to have a breach response plan. Every organization having a breach response plan that addresses insider threats, a variety of issues, right? So there's a maturity process that's going to have to happen in understanding what your security operations is supposed to be like within these companies. So,
thanks.
Sure.